Welcome to Life Today audio series. Life Today has a commitment to the social and economic renaissance of the people of Nigeria, Africa, and the rest of the so-called Third World. As far as we are concerned, you can have it all. Life Today revolutionarily tackles the very touchy issues of global competition, fast-paced, technology-driven change, and the place of the 21st century African student and young working-class professional. This is practically one of the most important materials you can listen to at such a time as this. Olakule Soriyan not only discusses the odds that confront us as a people, he uses very practical examples, drawing parallels from guerrilla revolutionaries to show how you and I, men and women of black skin and culture, can take our place in the global scheme of things. Let us now join Olakule Soriyan for the most revolutionary 1 hour of your life. Endangered Species: Guerrilla Tactics for Surviving the Times.
I decided to commit a volume of thought to the individuals who temporarily inhabit our higher institutions. Their commitment is with a view of coming out to eke a meaning for themselves in a fiercely competitive world. These are the individuals we refer to as students, and I have these individuals in mind in this discourse. I equally want to see if I can touch on a few cogent issues that will help young working Africans understand the terrain they play in and the odds they must strive against to sustain relevance. Now, I wouldn't know what you want out of life or what you desire, but let me explain what I have observed. I have observed that mediocrity is the ultimate lot of so many Africans, and that you and I may not be too far from it too. Most of the Africans, probably the Nigerians, listening to this CD probably come from what I call has-been homes. Father was doing very well when we were much younger, and if you are like me, I'm quite certain you remember the good old days. I grew up with something a little bit better than a silver spoon. In secondary school, I go to school in a chauffeur-driven Mercedes-Benz 230 regular. And for those who are aware, a Mercedes-Benz 230 in the early 80s was the machine to drive in those days. It was the exclusive preserve of governors, ministers, and even the very rich. My father dined with kings and mingled with the cream of the crop. We were so comfortable. But the glory soon departed, friends. In 1990, the last automobile in the family was sold. By 1999, at the ripe age of 83, my father died jumping around in the popular Lagos means of transportation called the Molue. We had become less than average and lost every form of relevance. My father's only legacy, as it were, was the education he left his children. I am certain most of us can well relate to this. Not too many of us desire to recycle the life and times of our fathers and mothers. What is, however, certain, sad as it is the reality that not too many of us have taken the time and the effort to analyze and learn from those circumstances and from the mistakes of years ago. We are simply positioned to recycle error, recycle mediocrity and opaqueness. Fortunately, I have done that. I have recycled, I have thought, I have evaluated, I have repositioned. I have checked the cause and the effects, and interestingly, my conclusions are quite alarming. Do you know 75% of the present-day Africans between the ages of 15 to 40 are ignorantly wired to end up mediocre or even worse? Now, don't be too swift to pass me over as a pessimist, mounting negative confessions. I have come to understand that life answers to something much more than positive confessions in itself. Life responds to the mindsets, the attitudes, and efforts we put into it altogether. With positive confessions, of course. What really do you want? How aware are you really of the challenges that lay ahead of us as a people? My resolve to produce this material stems from my firm conviction that residents right there in our universities are knowledge workers, not in the potential, but knowledge workers in the actual sense of it. The relevance of our tomorrow families, our tomorrow institutions and businesses, as well as our tomorrow nation, is quite frankly dependent on the sanity and balance of those individuals in the higher institutions. The onus is on them to tackle the responsibilities that will inevitably fall upon them, whether they are ready or not. If you are a student out there listening to me, it is imperative you understand the truth that what is coming will come. It is who you are and how prepared you are that will make all the difference. You will definitely have to graduate someday and get out there. Even if you don't graduate by the natural order of the system, you will by default, because the institution will eventually force you out. So, out there you must go. And out there, beyond the walls of the university, lies a very volatile world, riddled with shrewd foes. You must prepare to meet the odds that will, without a doubt, confront you as you greet the world. The challenge I have found is not in the odds that confront us, but in our readiness to meet them. Please let me talk about the odds that confront us a little bit. If you are a 21st century Nigerian student, it is important you realize that you are a decade or more behind the rest of the developed world. And as globalization eases the free flow of goods, persons, and services, you will no doubt be compelled to compete eventually with your counterparts from Japan, your counterparts from North America and Europe. As the world continues to spiral on the wheel of change, the African 21st century youth is fast becoming an endangered species. Already, your future is threatened and very uncertain. If you live in Africa, Nigeria for instance, you know that getting a job within the first 2 years, and this is being modest, is not really a surety. In 2007, I tell you, over 90,000 candidates applied in one of the nation's breweries for a job that could only accommodate only 10s. I am sure you know at least 2 graduates who are currently stranded in the job market. Some have resorted to seeking menial jobs in the informal sectors, some to more undercover activities. It is important you keep these realities in perspective before you get out there. And even if you decide to start off your own venture, you will most likely have to tackle epileptic power supply, ragged roads, high interest rates with short payback tenors. Come on. Weak economic policies are there to regulate you, and regulatory systems that leave you orphaned before you ever take off. Do you know that if you receive $10,000 to start off a business at the same time with a fresh graduate in America or even Ghana, with the same amount, he will already from kickoff be 5 years ahead of you? Why? Very simple. While you have to worry about buying a power generating set and the attendant cost of fuel, he will have no such worry. Your running costs will most likely be the bane of your business. You will have to battle the system because its infrastructures and policies are set somehow to frustrate you. And like every young adult, after you graduate and work a while, you will desire to get married and settle down, right? This is riddled with its own challenges as well. First of all, Shylock landlords are there. They will demand you pay 2 years rent when you just started earning a monthly salary. In-laws and culture will demand you throw a lavish party to celebrate your wedding, which could leave you drained for all I care. These obstacles and more will unrepentantly confront you. The truth is, with the very primitive system we live in, the propensity to fail and turn out mediocre is by far higher than that of success. Chances are, you will most likely fail than succeed. You will most likely hit the grave with unfulfilled potential than live fulfilled. You will most likely be unhappy than happy. Technology will continue to jack up the demands of life and work, and unfortunately, our system is not wired to catch up. Already, the workplace demands basic and advanced levels of computer appreciation, and there is no formal system to train you for it. You, my friend, are an endangered species. Let me talk to you for a minute. I do not know for certain if you have yet come to terms with the fact that the university which was instituted to harm you with the requisite tools to live an effective and productive life when you get out there is ill-equipped to do so. Take that. The growing disparity between academic school curricula and the needs and challenges of an ever-changing global economy are making the average graduate almost useless in today's knowledge economy. I hate to assert, but our academic institutions are outmoded. Our universities are like teachers trying to teach children about modern-day computers with a mainframe. Take a visit to our science laboratories. You will understand how disadvantaged we are in an age where science and technology is a key determinant of success and significance. Of course, Nigeria currently ranks as one of the least literate nations in science and maths the world over. Do you know that only less than 1/3 of our university graduates today are in any way ready for the challenges of work? The problems inherent in our society today are supposed to be platforms for new innovation and opportunities for advancement. But you and I were not trained to solve problems. The entities we gave our hard-earned money, our time, our crucial energy to, in exchange for formal training, have renegated on that assignment. We are trained to cram academic theories postulated ages ago. The irony is that we are trained to seek a white-collar job that is committed not to being found. Amazing, I must tell you. Formal education, despite its potential, is failing us on a grand scale, and so sadly, its culture. Let me talk to you a little bit about the history of present-day African formal education, so you can appreciate the challenges we are dealing with, and of course, how endangered you truly are in a winner-takes-all global economy. Historically, formal education in most African countries was developed to meet the needs of the colonial powers. When the Western powers established the colonies in Africa, they transplanted two major types of educational systems from Europe: the public schools under the leadership management of the government and the private schools that belonged to the churches. Religion dominated the private schools run by churches. That's okay. Education anywhere in the colonies was designed cheaply for boys, and the primary method of learning was simply memorizing. Colonial school curriculum in Africa was a conservative and traditionalist institution, and by its very nature, this school curriculum represented a subsystem in a much larger one, which was built on a low awareness and the capitalistic ideas of competitive materialism. This kind of educational system was more effective in maintaining the status quo of the colonial power than in adapting the curriculum to the local context to bring about social, economic, and of course, political change. The history taught to the colonized was not his own. Everything seemed to have taken place out of the shores of his country, and all the books cautiously talked to him of a world which in no way reminds him of his own. The colonial school curriculum served more or less to provide the indigenous people with jobs and to acquaint them with the traditions and customs of the colonizers. Education then was academic in nature and provided for very few among the colonized. It was elitist education based on discriminatory tendencies. It was based on the idea that a student is an object into which knowledge is placed, not a subject in the learning process. That's interesting. After independence, friends, two schools of thought arose to propose and defend how our schools must be governed and how the minds of those who shall eventually govern our affairs must be molded. These two schools of thought were the traditionalists and the progressivists. According to the traditionalists, what has been done in the past has been done well. Therefore, we should hold on to it in the future. The progressivists, on the other hand, pleaded to look critically at the past actions and practices to see what can now be done differently to make learning more satisfying and effective. And of course, looking at the curriculum, aligning it to the local context. The traditionalists also include persons who hold that a fixed or standard curriculum meets the needs of children, regardless of temporal or geographic considerations. Government and educators have long been divided into two major philosophical views. Traditionalists hold that one must accept the world as it is and then conform to it. Progressivists, on the other hand, favors widely differentiated curricula to develop the uniqueness of each human being, regardless of its seeming lack of promise and potential. If you are objective enough, you only need to consider the speed of unemployment and the employability of today's graduates to know that our institutions of learning and indeed our culture is far from being progressivist. Just in case you haven't noticed, you might want to note that the companies who should employ you are well aware. They know these facts as well. And since they are in the fight to sustain competitiveness within their own area of influence, and they need best talents and best brains to do so, they would rather have expatriates to do the job. Africans who studied abroad or exceptional candidates who studied here in Nigeria. Those who studied abroad are well in the minority, of course, and they stand a fair chance. Those who studied in the backwaters of our institutions here in Nigeria are both, interestingly, in the minority and in the majority class. The majority amongst them are endangered and will be condemned to mediocrity. The minority, those who through superior commitments have distinguished themselves, will most probably thrive. Now, the question is, do you qualify as an exceptional candidate? Who is an exceptional candidate? The exceptional candidate anywhere, not only in the marketplace, but in life as a whole, is one who has taken personal responsibility for his or her own learning. You must understand the disconnect that exists between what the university teaches and what the marketplace requires. As technology continues to shrink the world, it will get easier for local companies to outsource parts of their processes to skilled foreigners. Of course, skilled foreigners willing to provide affordable labor. This is already a fast-growing trend. Globalization will not only affect nations and companies, it will and is already affecting you. It is pitching you up against more sophisticated global competition. The bar has been raised without your permission. You now must raise your game. You cannot afford to fall prey to the nonchalance and ignorance that characterizes the average youth. The world does not revolve around sports and entertainment, friends. Life is serious business. I watch my television set these days, and I'm appalled at the mounting number of reality shows and talent hunts distracting our youths from the challenges of everyday life. I am not against entertainment or leisure, as long as it is purposeful and it adds up to the critical goal. What books will you read to make the difference? What professional skills do you have feasible plans to acquire? How much of information and communication technology are you willing to embrace? What exactly do you want to do? Do you want to work in a bank or telecommunications outfit because they will pay you much more money? Or do you have a dream, a vision? Do you have potentials unrealized and therefore seek expression of those commitments? The banking industry in Nigeria, for example, has become a graveyard of some sort. Take that from me. Buried within it are masses and masses of potential. Young graduates across disciplines who have buried their creative capacities and sold their destinies for a mess of pottage. We have too many young people, virile, creative minds wasting away behind counters and seeking robust accounts for one bank or the other. Of course, the banks and the oil companies will give comfort and convenience, but they cannot offer significance. Most assuredly, history and indeed the future will judge us, not on how comfortable we end up, but how significantly we live our lives. And please, don't get me wrong on this one. I am not saying it is wrong to work in a bank or an oil and gas firm. But if the sole reason you want to do so is because you want to be comfortable and you simply want to survive, then you have a critical problem, which will catch up with you, of course, in the long run. The world today is changing faster than the average guy can catch up. Studentship in this vein becomes a lifetime commitment. You cannot confront today and tomorrow's challenges with yesterday's knowledge. What you need is to develop and sustain a posture for renewing knowledge and to find creative ways to apply timeless information. You cannot afford to wait until you graduate to upgrade and keep upgrading your knowledge. You must start now and continue till you hit the grave. And don't confuse it when I talk about upgrading your knowledge. This is not limited to enrolling for your master's or your doctorate or studying a professional course. The world is too loaded with knowledge and self-help materials for us to restrict ourselves to the world of academia. Today, we have 10 billion pages of information posted on the internet, more than enough to keep us busy the rest of our lives. And new information is being added daily. Do you know that more information has been generated in the last 100 years than all of the previous 100,000 years combined? Wow. We need commitment and wisdom to sift through and convert these billions of pages into information riches, since the internet wasn't created simply for chatting, sending and receiving mails. We must create and sustain the systems and, of course, the feasible goals and plans to improve ourselves today, because our entire future depends on it. Nobody's going to give you a chance just because your name sounds nice or you look good. Well, maybe the beauty pageants and the modeling agencies. But in the real world, your brain will work or you will produce and gain nothing. We are endangered species in the globalizing world, where technology is the language of performance and wealth. It is the determinant of how we live, how we learn, and how we love tomorrow. You do not stop being a student when you make your exit from the university. You must keep learning faster than the world is changing. Many years ago, a student dropped out of Harvard University to pursue a dream that would change the world. He stayed true to his commitments. And today, you and I will never forget William Gates III and his baby Microsoft. In January 1996, 2 Stanford University graduate students got together to pursue a research project. Together, Larry Page and Sergey Brin scrounged some funds to commence what would later become known as Google, the giant IT firm none of us can truly do without. The world will continue to remember the eventful year of January 26, 1956. It was the year a few students got sick and tired of oppression and opposed the government. Spurred on by the now historical words of their leader, and I quote, "We will be free or we will be martyrs," unquote. They proceeded to lead one of the most successful revolutions ever. Love him or hate him, the world will never forget Fidel Castro. While we no longer need violent revolutions, the fact remains that these were students. And see how they turned history on its head. What will you do? Students can make a difference even before they get out there. Students have the advantage because they enjoy direct fellowship with knowledge. As a student, You must be able to contribute critical dimensions of innovation and be a part of those who orchestrate the future. This is your call, and you must brace up to it. Begin to create products and services today. Think about the abounding problems in a continent like ours and see your role as a key player, as a key solution provider. It will require that we rise above the imbalances within the academic systems to discover creative ways for managing our own personal research and seek funding for self-initiated projects. I believe in this so strongly. It is as far as you want to take it, really. Only the exceptional think in this dimension, and only the exceptional will be willing to embrace the challenge inherent. You can etch your name in the sands of history if you want to. I have always said that chance can be a scientist, but chance cannot become Albert Einstein. Chance can be a Christian, but chance cannot become the German Martin Luther. Chance can be an activist, but chance cannot be a Martin Luther King Jr. Chance can make a lawyer, but chance cannot make a Mahatma Gandhi. Chance can make a writer, but chance cannot make a William Shakespeare. Success can be a product of chance, but greatness demands key sacrifices. You can make a difference if you make your sacrifices. You can make a difference, but your difference comes at a price, and that price is learning, and learning in a changing world. Only 20% or less will create the change we crave, and only 20% will rule 80% of the masses. The question is, will you form a part of this elite group, or will you not? The odds are against you, I tell you. You are endangered.
African students are not the only species endangered in today's volatile world of life and work. According to the International Organization for Migration, 20,000 professionals leave the continent each year to seek greener pastures abroad, leaving many more behind. For those left behind, the challenges are beginning to mount slowly but surely. Corporations are requiring more complex skills workers may need to pay through their noses to acquire. Olakule Soriyan takes us into the world of work and drags to the light some of the daunting odds facing white and blue-collar professionals all across the continent. Let's continue with the session.
If you are on the cutting edge of work, of business and life today, you will agree with me that a kind of world has since disappeared. The world where all it took to get and sustain a good job was to attend a state-owned or a private university, graduate probably with a first class, second class, upper or lower credit, go for your national youth service, get out, wield your certificates as proof of your qualifications, and maybe know one or two people in the right places. That world has disappeared. The bar of entry and the requirement for sustainability and advancement in the world of work has since risen to unprecedented heights. But despite the high level of insecurity that characterizes today's workplace, tremendous opportunities are bound for workers to increase their relevance and grow their wealth significantly. Some call it the end of business as usual. What has been does not necessarily remain a survival tool for what is or what will be. The way things were done yesterday, that is the past, has little or nothing to do with the way we should do them today and tomorrow, the future, except to the extent that we are able to deliberately observe and establish a link between these time variables. In the past, we have embraced downsizing, but now we are looking at talent retention and management. We have been excited about the possibilities and potentials of huge company conglomerates, but today we are living with the elasticity of mergers, acquisitions, and generally about networks of companies. Yesterday was the time for centralized control, but today is the time for decentralization and delegation. We have promoted the principles that sustain self-centered and product-centered organizations, but now we are concerned about absolutely customer-centered organizations. We have sold the idea of customer satisfaction for years, but despite its daunting success, we have moved on to embrace customer loyalty and even now customer advocacy. We have related with professional service firms, but today units within organizations are learning to relate as miniature professional service firms within the organization. In the past, we talked about company hierarchy, but today we have to talk about role playing and people networks. We have used the physical office structure for decades as the prerequisite for business success. Today, organizations like Google and Facebook are teaching to value the virtual. At the time, we called them suppliers and distributors, but today we deliberately and pridefully consider them our valued network. We give awards to organizations like Peugeot for their machinery and equipment. But now we value organizations like Amazon or eBay for sustaining higher market capitalization despite all the machinery of the former. In the past, we talked about stability and slow bureaucracy. Today, we are talking about everyday change and alliances. We witness how humans did the jobs that machines can do perfectly well. But today, we must talk about avoiding any single process that does not contribute with the real value for the client. Globalization is making it easy, even for workers in third world nations, to solve problems for multinational firms millions of miles away without leaving their base. As a matter of fact, the traditional work setting is slowly losing its grip and giving birth to a virtual world of work characterized by free agents and freelancers armed with laptops and access to the internet. The last 30 years has presented countries like the Asian tigers, Japan, Singapore, South Korea, and China. They have grown at an incredible pace that is basically 3 times that of Britain or the United States at the peak of the Industrial Revolution. Anticipating and managing organizational change, friends, vis-a-vis knowledge, is the key when time is compressed and complexity intensified. It is pretty obvious that companies and organizations of the next decade will have little or nothing to do with the organizations in the industrial economy. To appreciate this, the human capacity development methodologies have to be revolutionarily different. Corporations are willing to part with huge amounts of money and give out alluring perks to attract and retain best talents. Again, true to Moore's law, computer chips have continued to double in power every 18 months while dropping in cost by 30% every year. When a single chip has enormous power and a typical desktop computer offers features such as voice activation and full motion video, computers really will become the ultimate workers. Keep in mind that computers do not possess any of the emotional excesses of humans. They don't need to spend time with the family. They do not need a vacation, sick leaves, or coffee breaks. The truth is, most of the jobs we do today have no hope of competing with such powerful computers, just as workers in the last century could not compete with the powered machinery that assumed most of the physical work. We have witnessed the evolution of work from the farms to the factories, and now to high-rise towers. Today, a great majority of the jobs available are within a sphere of the managerial, professional, technical, service, and clerical. In other words, a greater percentage of the jobs available are in the service sector. As a matter of fact, most of the staffers who work in manufacturing firms are actually engineers. They are lawyers, accountants, and HR personnel. Unfortunately, most of these jobs are highly systematic and left-brained and will sooner or later be taken over by powerful computers. We are already on the threshold of artificial intelligence, friends, and the effect will cause more ripples. As of 2002, do you know, IBM commenced research on one of its biggest research projects ever. The object of this research was termed Project ELIZA. Project ELIZA is a project equally focused on intellect, that is, artificial intellect. The project basically aims to repair busted computer systems by creating wholly new solutions never before imagined. Now, consider the possibilities that will be made available by such thinking machines and the impact it will have on the men and women who until now perform these tasks. As it is, computers may no longer be replacing only staffers who perform routine paper processing chores, but with technological breakthroughs like ELIZA, they just may be gunning for management positions. Management positions? Yes, possibly yours. In a 2002 interview, General Electric CEO Jeff Immelt assertively stated that 75% of GE's administrative and back-collar office jobs will be digitized. And that is saying microprocessors and computer telecom networks will accomplish them. And today, that is already coming to pass. These are the realities working men and women from all over the world would have to contend with. And in fact, they are already contending with it. But these are not only realities. As at 1999, the nation of India insourced approximately 50 million jobs at about $20 each. And note, these were not just routine jobs. These were jobs that required the expertise of knowledge workers. Airlines, banks, insurance, and a host of other sectors are moving tasks off-site in search of cheaper but skillful labor. Already, advanced software design tasks are being outsourced to places like Bangalore and Hyderabad. Also note, the tasks being outsourced were once carried out by salary-earning people working within organizational structures who had bills to pay and mouths to feed. But out goes their tax, and most likely out goes their job too. Against the backdrop of these transforming realities, one phrase will best describe the 21st century worker functioning within structured system, and that phrase is endangered species. Welcome to the new world of work, where only the truly innovative survive. These realities have their consequences, my friend, most especially for African working men and women. Since we have developed an incredible reputation for copying the innovations of America and Europe, we will copy these advancements. We may not lead, we may not fully maximize it, but we will copy it. It will not be difficult to copy since we only produce what we don't consume, and of course, consume what we don't produce. Our copying posture is one of the critical factors responsible for our status as the world's single largest liability. Already, unemployment is a key issue facing the region, almost as much as employability is. The graduates the universities are chucking out into the market, and the companies who should employ them are proving to be acutely incompatible. The corporations are shoring up their operations in order to enable them compete favorably globally, but to do this, they need skilled labor, of course. Labor able to perform at par with global standards. Now, when I say skilled labor, do not presume you know what I mean. We have since left the era when skilled labor meant a university graduate brandishing a degree, certifying him to be an economics engineer, lawyer, or doctor. Today's workforce defines skill in completely different dimensions. Labor is adjudged intellectual capital, and the skills demanded for productivity from today's workforce go beyond the theories and theorems that were taught within the four walls of academia. Today's worker is expected to think critically, analytically, and literally. He's expected to solve knotty problems and innovate at neck-breaking speed. But you know what? The world isn't just changing of its own volition. Men are actually making the discoveries that are fostering change. Your ability to operate in the class of those who are not just responding to change, but who are actually in the forefront of initiating the changes that shape the way we live and work. That is what actually makes you an indispensable asset in today's workplace. The call, therefore, is for today's worker to employ himself as his own taskmaster and commence a journey of radical self-improvement. This must take place on two fronts. One, today's worker must be able to develop problem-solving capacities to enable him innovate rapidly. And two, he must develop emotional intelligence to enable him synergize effectively with other knowledge workers. You must push your capacity to grow and, of course, to develop and to learn new skills beyond its elastic limits. If your contributions are not radical and innovative enough, then trust me, you are on a slippery ground. On what side of the divide we stand between capitalizing on the opportunities the 21st century presents and the prevailing insecurity will be largely dependent on how much of the world of work we understand and how effectively we position ourselves to play in it. Your destiny in this regard is in your very hand. This material is an expression of my commitment to the economic and social renaissance of the people and institutions of Third World Africa. If we must survive and thrive, indeed, if we must live up to the true value of our potentials, then there are certain attributes we must imbibe, certain things we must know, and certain postures we must adopt. This material is a quest to see if perhaps we could alter our paradigm a little and provoke the change you and me and our continent so desperately needs. Welcome to a new world of possibilities. Journey with me as we learn die-hard strategies for surviving these times.
The Persian king Darius called in some Greek visitors into his palace and asked them how much money they would accept to eat their parents' dead bodies. The Greeks, who practiced cremation, were horrified at the thought and said that no amount of money would suffice for the ultimate insult that would offend their parents by such an act. Then, in their presence, the king called some of the members of an Indian tribe, who in fact eat their parents' dead bodies, and asked them how much they would take to cremate their parents' dead bodies. The Indians begged the king not to mention such a horrible thing. Herodotus summed up the moral of the story by quoting Pindar, "Culture is all." On this segment of the CD, Olakule Soriyan takes a deep look into how cultural norms and idiosyncrasies have contributed in making today's African an endangered species in a changing world. We cannot outperform our mindsets. If we must alter our circumstances, then we must shift paradigm. Let us join Olakule Soriyan as he proceeds to help us do just that.
Civilization has its roots in culture. Our sense of development and responsibility are to very large extent derived from the influences of our environment. Of course, you know that. Culture is the interactive aggregate of common characteristics that influence a human group's response to its environment. For example, I grew up in a polygamous home where almost everyone was a potential opposition. I grew up learning to fight for and defend my turf. Synergy, partnership, and collaboration were strange and foreign terms to me. The only way forward in my little enclave at the time was by any and every means necessary, even if it meant progressing at the expense of the next man. This background had a profound impact on my outlook and, of course, my perception of the larger society. I saw the entire world as a vicious place where dog eats dog. And for so many years, I struggled. I believed everyone was out to get me. This was how I saw the world, and it limited me. Until my paradigm began to shift. I was, and as it were, a victim of culture. I attended primary and secondary institutions where the teacher was revered and practically unquestionable. His words was law, and every attempt at critical independent thinking was squashed with the end of a bamboo rod on my behind. I was trained to follow the status quo, trained not to query nor vary. I was hypnotized unconsciously to believe that the invention of technology and all the fancy gadgets I had access to were the exclusive preserve of some elites, otherwise called the oppressor. I proceeded to the university and was given a certificate to qualify me for a white-collar job after 12 years. To the best of my knowledge, few or none of my lecturers ever produced any original thought or any tangible invention. And even if they did, it was barely celebrated and of little or no social, economic, or commercial relevance. To sum it all up, I was trained to operate within the box, to depend on the West for critical technology and even art. I grew up like many others in this system, where mediocrity parades itself almost unchallenged. My environment really wasn't peculiar to me. Where I came from, these were the norm. These were in no certain terms the culture. In Africa, some part of our culture must be codified, must be learned and preserved. But there are some parts of it we have inherited, repackaged and reinvented by Western influence. Some for our good, but most left to us to self-destruct. The cultures we must walk away from are those which history, through the hypnotism of the impact of oppression and slavery, compelled us to adopt. To define who we are as Africans has become a symposium discussion, and our youths are too distracted with sports and entertainment to sit in the symposium rooms or to read the emancipation materials. So, culture indeed is the culprit. Championship in today's world is a result of independent, critical, and creative thinking, traits which are in themselves nurtured by the existing norms that govern our prevailing environment. The inventive mind is trained with a culture that encourages it to probe its environment, judge its findings, interpret the resulting facts, and act on them. Let us consider the following scenario.
Christine is a 20-year-old American in her 4th year at college. She lives in her own apartment and drives her own car. Christine juggles 2 after-school jobs, plays the piano perfectly, and speaks French. In North America, where she resides, she is a perfectly normal adult and has numerous friends just like her. She thinks for herself, makes her own decisions, learns from her mistakes, and shoulders the responsibilities for her failures and successes. Abike, on the other hand, is a 20-year-old counterpart of Christine living in third world Nigeria. She is in her 2nd year at the university after spending 2 years at home trying to pass JAMB and 3 years at the university due to incessant strikes. Abike lives with her parents and practically depends on them for everything she needs. She can scarcely make any independent decision, not necessarily because she can't work, but there are just too many eyes interested in the credibility and quality of those decisions. She most probably has a very narrow view of the world around her. She has little or no idea how money works or how politics affects her. She most likely has not been trained to think through issues or to form independent, original opinions. For Abike, her next 2 years will be spent predominantly within the four walls of the university, where she'll be supported financially and guided through by her parents. In the university, she would hardly attend classes, where she would be given the privilege to engage in interactive classroom discussions, where students will be urged to share their views and independent thinking will be fostered. Lecturers will verbally abuse her through those years, and she will practically be treated as a glorified high school student. Abike would most likely be a dependent until she finishes her university education and launches out into the workplace, unprepared to handle the complexities of life. She will be a dependent till she gets married in her late 20s or early 30s, or even later than that, if she ever does. Here in Nigeria, Abike is the norm. Christine, living in Nigeria, she would most definitely be an exception.
Friends, culture is corporate. We must rethink our paradigms. There are 3 key areas our acceptable norms are failing us. One of them is responsibility. It took me 28 years of living for me to take responsibility for my life. At 30 years old, I was still living with my parents without any qualms. I am sure many of us can relate to this reality. As Africans, we operate such close-knit family structures, and this in itself is strength, but it has its downsides, friend. We have very strong support systems that force an almost lethargic disposition towards life on us, denying us of that keen sense of responsibility, that keen sense of mission. We have aunties, in-laws, brothers, sisters, cousins, even family friends to lean on for support. Most likely, all through your years at the university, you had someone else who was responsible for paying your fees, and you were equally brought up to recycle this same support system. At 24 in Nigeria, it is perfectly normal to be an undergraduate and to still stay with your parents. I am not outrightly condemning this or saying any 24-year-old staying with his parent has failed in life. But I want us to see how slow we really are in taking responsibility for ourselves. I believe that for anyone to live a truly fulfilled and productive life, there are at least 18 basic things he must know, do, and sustain before he's 20, and at least 25 things before he's 30, and you are free to add to the list. My research tells me that over 90% of Nigerians in their late 20s and of course early 30s have not even grasped half of what I just spoke about. The truth is, anyone who did not gain mastery over these 18 things before 20 and still has not is critically endangered in today's world. And I will quickly run through them. There are 18 things you must know, do, and sustain before you are 20. Number 1, you must know everything about the value and the use of money. Number 2, you must have complete understanding of what I call the Power 5. That is money, clothes, opposite sex, social exchange, and fame. 3, you must develop a working, talking relationship with at least one qualified mentor. 4, finish higher education, or at least be in your finals with 1 or 2 certifications. 5, you must have read at least 48 career and self-improvement books at your core. 6, build a network of at least 5 millionaire adult friends. 7, master a good saving habit of at least 10% of your income. 8, master a habit of routine daily exercise. 9, research and have a firm grasp of the responsibilities of dating, courtship, and marriage. 10, be computer literate. 11, learn and sustain a good time use and energy deployment culture. 12, have a realistic development plan covering 5 years of your life. 13, research and understand the power of personal branding within your area of influence. 14, learn and decide how you will be positively different from your peers in thought, in conduct, and dressing. 15, learn the dignity of hard work and the glory of a balanced life. 16, practice the noble habit of giving and sharing. It's called benevolence. 17, know God and sustain a commitment to Him. 18, speak a second language. Now, there are 25 things you must also know, do, and sustain before you are 30. 1. Begin paying off any form of loans if you haven't already done so. You must be totally debt-free. 2. You must have been able to set aside enough money for emergencies. 3. Start investing aggressively into future goals like a down payment for a house. Start thinking of investing internationally too. 4. Start planning for retirement. 5. If you are married, know and understand and use the cover of the insurance world. 6. Retain a lawyer for just-in-time legal advice. 7. Have a complete physical checkup. Get baseline readings on your blood pressure and cholesterol, etc. 8. Safeguard your fertility by seeing a gynecologist annually. 9. Tighten your abs. 10. Use holidays and get into the habit of practicing stress relief. 11. Complete hold on your emotions so that you have the power and the capacity to direct it as you please. 12. Create other streams of income apart from your main job or business. 13. Be financially and materially comfortable and at least own your own property. 14. Be passionate and be dogged about the pursuit of information. 15. Be married, having dated and sustained a courtship for at least 2 years. 16. Learn and practice all you can on getting you and your family to think global relevance. 18. Be very bold and confident and be completely free of timidity. 19. Have a very strong network of millionaires and at least one billionaire friend if possible. 20. Own healthy relationship with at least a qualified mentor. 21. Sustain a realistic 25-year plan in the least. 22. Keep a very strong national brand positioning internationally with well-organized structures. 23. Strengthen your commitment to benevolence and philanthropy. 24. Increase your spiritual awareness as well as convictions. And lastly, 25. Discern and articulate your personal core values and habitually practice them.
For the complete teaching of the law of arrangement, 60 things to know, do, and sustain before you are 50, and what to do if you have missed any, contact Life Today on 0806 166 0945 or 0802 240 9800, or send us an email on loa@lifetoday.net or products@lifetoday.net immediately.
I find it interesting to note that Condoleezza Rice bagged a doctorate at the age of 24. And just before you think she is exceptional, you might want to note that Mark Zuckerberg, the chief executive of social networking site Facebook, a company with an annual turnover of $150 million, is only 24 years old. I saw with utter amazement the interview of 13-year-old child prodigy Akian. Akian is a world-acclaimed painter and poet. Akian has been selected as one of the top 20 most accomplished visual artists in the world by Tribute Entertainment London and ABI, United States. Most accomplished at the age of 13. I think that's amazing. Akian wakes up 4 a.m. every day to worship and prepare for work. 4 a.m. every day. At the age of 13, she has written 2 best-selling books, Akian, A Life, A Art, A Poetry, and My Dream is Bigger Than I, Memories of Tomorrow, and has been interviewed by every TV show host available from Oprah to Good Morning America. At 13, she already has the disposition of an adult. Some of her best paintings are selling for as high as $1 million. But you know what? She's only slightly different from other kids like her, who were brought up in a culture where responsibility is taught at the time most appropriate. You can call Akian a genius. I think she's simply a visionary, focused, responsible, and resilient young girl. For me, I only became conscious of life and its demands at the age of 27. Prior to this, I had no idea of planning and goal setting. I had never of my own volition read any book except that which I was compelled to read academically. As Africans, our culture has set us back by at least a decade, and now we must brace up to this reality and face the odds. As a matter of fact, most of us were not even given the privilege or the opportunity of taking responsibility for what course we wanted to study in the university. Again, we cannot afford to park here and just blame culture. The first thing you must understand is that you You and nobody else is ultimately responsible for your success or failure. It took me many years of embarrassing defeats to come to terms with the fact that no system, no person or people were responsible for what I get out of life. Accepting responsibility for my progress, I mean total responsibility, not blaming any institution, any system or person, provided me the platform upon which I build my own relevance with God's help, of course. Taking responsibility means that I can determine from my present position where exactly my life will be in the next, say, 5 or 10 years. It means I will decide to go into each day with a pledge to give my absolute best. It means I determine how I feel about my relationships, my work and life. It means I sum up enough willpower to discover and pay the sacrifices necessary for my critical advancement. In 1997, after it dawned on me that my life was going nowhere and I had failed, I took the first truly noble decision of my life. I decided to take responsibility. I wasn't going to run to any auntie, to any uncle, a friend or brother. I was going to face life with God and beat a portion for myself. As at 1995, I had blown it big time. I was out of the university in my final year. I had become, as it were, the proverbial black sheep of the family, and achieving any form of success would have greatly surprised my folks. I had been beaten down by life, no doubt, and the only reasonable choice I had were to remain on the path of retrogression and settle down to a life of acute mediocrity, which in itself would have been suicidal for me, or to resiliently dust my resolve and forge on despite the odds. I'm sure you guessed right. I chose the latter. I ventured out and started pushing refuse bins. Then I moved on to fumigating and on to selling barbecue. I remember my first night of business as a barbecue man. I was arrested and whisked away by the police for illegal mounting. I started out with 3 pieces of fish and 2 turkeys, all of which got burnt before I could wriggle out of the hold of the police. But resolutely, I resumed business the next day at the same spot. Thus began my long, hard journey into the world of business as an entrepreneur. Today, I am a veteran of some sort, with war medals and battle scars. Permit me to blow my trumpet a little bit. A consultant's consultant and a business philosopher of some credible repute. The road is still stretched long before me. But looking back, I can barely catch a glimpse of where it all started. I know the sleepless nights and the toil and the anticipations, the dashed hopes and satisfied longings. I know the joy, the contentment and fulfillment of taking responsibility for one's own life. There are 3 critical areas every African must take responsibility for if they are to survive the times we live in and of course face the competition that is already out there. Number 1, you must take responsibility for your personal growth and development. Your survival in these times is directly proportional to how much capacity you are able to actually build. We must have a system for increasing capacity on a regular basis. I remember a young man who came to me a few years back seeking for a job. He had been out of school for over 5 years, and I found it absolutely appalling to know that he had not in the least bit added anything new to his CV after 5 years. What that meant was that after 5 years of leaving school and searching for a job, he had not sought any formal or informal means to upgrade his skill level and his CV. What that meant is that for that 5 years, he had not improved, he's not better, he had remained on one spot, practically stagnant, which means retrogression. I mean, 5 years should have been enough to take a professional course, learn a second language or something, or learn to play a new instrument. I mean, if after 5 years your CV still looks the same, it's simply a show of social and intellectual imbalance. I'm sorry to say that, but that is the truth. You know, you find some of the laziest people in this world in the white-collar work environment. For some of these people, work is a burden, a necessary cross they must bear. And so they avoid it at the slightest opportunity. You have working men and women today who have not read a single book on effectiveness, on productivity, teamwork, or personal development. We must be determined to stretch beyond our comfort zones, to reinvent ourselves continually if we are to make any meaningful headway in these times and in the days ahead. This will require that we remain in a perpetual mode of preempting and cashing, CASH, cashing in on new changes and upgrading our skill level from time to time. It will require that we align with global best practices. All this entails good measures of diligent investment in time, of course, and in effort to build and grow capacity. It must, however, be done in line with predetermined goals. You must have plans to grow mentally, to grow emotionally, to grow socially and technically. Very few things are more vital, I tell you. Number 2, you must take responsibility for your originality. Nothing is purely new. Everything is a product of some influence or the other. But the average African is a victim of the West. It's difficult to find one youth today who isn't a crossbreed between America and Nigeria. I understand it is okay to pick and learn from cultures. We can learn and pick from culture, but we cannot imitate. Research has shown that whenever you imitate, you bypass the genius of the host and instead copy their eccentricities, their excesses, and their weaknesses. Very little of that renowned American culture of enterprise and innovation, daring research is imitated by our people today. But a lot of American eccentricity is being transplanted into our own culture. That is why we have hundreds, if not thousands, of our young people today who are clones of Hollywood, hip-hop, and R&B celebrities. It is important we take responsibility for our originality. Baggy jeans cannot give you a kobo. A good afro cannot give you a dime in the bank. True originality is the key to the future that we seek. True originality might require some form of positive rebellion. You know, some years ago, I decided to stop wearing my wristwatch on my left wrist. Fashion suggests this to be an abnormality, but I wouldn't lose my uniqueness for the norm. I derive a kick from taking responsibility for my originality, and I equally derive a lot of relevance from it. I met a young man who came to me some time ago to guide him as he embarked on a sojourn in public speaking. At his request, I was asked to listen to some of his material. Since I didn't have the time, I offered to ask him a simple question instead, which I believe will suffice. My simple question was, if Zig Ziglar, Stephen Covey, John C. Maxwell, Anthony Robbins, Miles Morrow, and Brian Tracy, and all those people were to be in the room listening to you speak or listening to this CD, will they take note and draw inspiration from the novelty of your ideas, or will they simply acknowledge you as a faithful student of their word? Of course, he couldn't give me an answer, because he realized right there he was a pack of photocopy, busy recycling American thoughts. You know, when you go seeking for a job or for an admission into university, you are initially required to come with the photocopies of your credential. But this will only last as long as they are satisfied with you. Somewhere along the line, you will be required to bring in the original copies of your credential. Friend, the photocopy at its best only announces the original. In what way are you going to be different from everybody else in your department or in your workplace or even in your neighborhood? This cannot happen by default, not by chance either. You must be able to say in clear terms what makes you different and original in all your pursuit. You don't want to be another U2 student or business person. The greatest differentiating factor between those who will survive these times and those who won't will be the ability to engender original scenario. The ongoing battle for talent is really a battle for innovators. Innovation bespeaks originality, and originality, I must tell you, is a scarce commodity. You must be able to work yourself into becoming a reservoir for fresh and original ideas. Life and the workplace do not reward you for your similarities, but rather for your difference. You cannot afford to be lost in the crowd, doing what everybody else does. There must be something that sets you apart and sticks you out like a sore thumb. Organizations are looking for independent minds that detest businesses as usual. People who are not afraid to question the status quo, value others who stand out with very little effort because they are courageous enough to be themselves. Number 3, take responsibility for how you are perceived. This is very, very critical. Imagine how much resource companies all over the world expend annually to create a public perception of their corporate brand. As a matter of fact, an entire advertising and PR industry has been carved out for this purpose. Companies understand the importance of perceived value, and so they do all they can to create an impression in the minds of the buying public. You must also come to terms with this. People will respond and relate to you based on their perception of your personality. At every point in time, you are being evaluated. You are a product, and you must accept responsibility for your sales. And every product has an expiring date. You will be evaluated, rewarded, respected, admired, and assisted by observers based not only on how you truly perform, but also, and most critically, for how well they perceive you perform. And of course, how well they perceive your attitude. The entire stock market works on this principle. It is your responsibility to develop the necessary skills that allow you to control the behavior of others as well as yours in a way that advances your cause everywhere you find yourself. It's called emotional intelligence. It's called branding. It's called advertising. It's called PR. This requires skill, and it must be a deliberate effort. I always tell people this. If you are misunderstood or disrespected, it is your fault. But understand that you meet people on your way up, down, and across the ladder. Whichever way you move, it is therefore important that you create impressions that win you more friends and necessary enemies. Did I say necessary enemies? Yes, I just did. Regardless of how much effort you are throwing into managing your perception, if you make an enemy taking a stand for what is right, then that is a necessary enemy. The necessary enemy is a needed motivating factor on the path of progress. I encourage you to take a serious-minded approach towards building a credible perception with your uplines, with your peers, and downline, because everybody matters. I always advise people to consider themselves a personal brand. Employ yourself as a brand manager and create a brand management strategy for managing the perceived value of your brand. Your primary responsibility to your brand is to first of all know its worth and its current perceived value. One practical way you can go about doing this is to solicit feedbacks in an informal fashion from key allies. Some people sustain incredible nuisance value. Take necessary feedback from those you trust and those who believe in you and whom you can confide in. Do something. Whichever way, it may be important to keep in mind that not all of these feedbacks will be completely devoid of some level of bias. Because the truth is, some people may form opinions about you which are actually subjective. So, don't be thrown off balance by some of the feedbacks you receive, and don't ignore them either. Remember, the reason you solicited feedbacks in the first place was to gauge your current perceived value. You could also go about getting feedbacks in a more formal way. Hand out questionnaires to selected uplines, some pairs, and downline. Let the questions be structured to elicit the relevant feedback. Seek answers that touch on your behavior and competence. A typical question to an upline could read something like this: how will you rate my competence on a scale of 1 to 5? What areas do you think I need to pay critical attention to? What areas have thus far been impressive in my relationship with you or in my work? Resist the temptation to focus overtly on the negative aspects of the feedbacks you receive. These feedbacks may not be a perfect reflection of you after all, but they could provide you with a good platform to objectively commence a repositioning of your brand. Making changes to your personality may not be exactly easy, but it could yield great dividends if you go through with it. Having solicited feedbacks, begin to alter your perceived value positively by using the feedbacks you have gathered. Outline new goals for yourself. How do you want to be perceived? What disparities exist between how you are currently perceived and how you desire to be perceived? And how do you intend to bridge the gap? This may mean gradually altering your style, your conduct, your personality radically. It may mean that people who have been used to the old you may need to get used to a completely rebranded you. Seize every opportunity you can to communicate the new you. Stay focused and committed to the change process. Get few trusted friends to hold you accountable to your new brand and assist you in making periodic evaluations. Employ a keen sense of self-awareness all through the process. Keep in mind the impact your words and deeds have on others. Keep that in view. Make yourself visible when it matters most and know how to blow your own trumpet without coming across as arrogant, forward, or cocky. These steps will set you in the right path for creating a healthy perception of you in the minds of your observers. People will celebrate, criticize, or even refer you based on what they perceive of you, and what they perceive of you is a combination of the impressions you leave as you interact, perform, and deliver through life on a daily basis. So take responsibility for your personal brand image. You know, growing up, avoiding walks was just the natural thing to do. Life was much more fun after school hours. We grew up with an unconscious disdain for anything that demanded we employ physical and mental effort. For most of us, this same attitude trailed us through university. And to make matters worse, we took up courses not because we had any particular inclination towards them, but rather because they would better position us to get a good paying job, or because they simply look easier to study than others. And so we graduated, got a good paying job for the sole purpose of paying the bills, and settled down to life unhappily ever after. Let's face it, so many of us are miserable with our lives, and we can tie in a great deal of this to how we feel about our jobs. We feel all burnt out and stressed up with barely enough time for some of those things that really do matter to us. As a matter of fact, we feel trapped, but we must work because we must pay the bills. Can I ask you a very candid question? Do you really enjoy your job? Are you in the least bit enthusiastic when you wake up each morning and you know you have to go to work? I bet those who can answer these questions affirmatively are in the minority. The reason is that the average African works to survive. Work for him is simply a meal ticket, not a cause, not an avenue to contribute to the larger picture of life, definitely not a mission to society. That is the primary reason very few are truly satisfied on the job. I have counseled with a number of bankers and professionals from other fields who all but love their jobs. They wish they could not only get off the treadmill, they wish they could actually smash it in two. But then again, the treadmill keeps the bills paid, ensures the children stay in school, ensures the woman is happy, the clothes are classy, and life comfortable. What a way to live. And we wonder why we have such an unproductive economy. The case is not that we should not work. The case is to work to learn, work to give, work with the peace and freedom of your conscience as a critical success indicator. There are 3 categories of people in every workplace, and if you are a student, you might want to pay close attention to how this currently relates to you and how it will affect you eventually. Number 1, those who hold a natural distaste for work and who dislike their jobs acutely. They resume work every morning and put in just enough effort to secure their jobs, albeit dispassionately. They are those I call just their performers. They never do anything exceptional, nothing extraordinary on the job. They are engaged in routine left-brain tasks, and as far as the 21st century is concerned, they are disposable materials. The second category of people are those who do not mind work in itself, but who dislike the job they do and only do it because they need the money. They are average performers, but sometimes due to their capacity for work, they go the extra mile and perform extraordinarily on the job. These, like the first category, are equally disposable material, endangered species in a world where increasing demands are being placed on consistent, innovative performance. The third category of people are those who do not only love work as a concept, but also love their job. They are reputed for taking the initiative. They meet each task with gusto and produce results consistently. They are exceptional in every sense of the word and have very little problem finding their way to the top of the ladder. Only this category of people will be able to survive the demands of work in 21st century. Where do you stand? From what category do you play? The years ahead of us will see the falling away of category 1 and 2. That is a guarantee. They will simply self-destruct and vanish by default. The competition will become much more intense, so much so that the system of work will be unable to tolerate those who are simply coping. Surviving our times demands we reinvent our entire outlook to work into one that embraces work not just as a survival tool, but as an opportunity, a privilege to render useful service. One that views the workplace as a forum to synergize with individuals keen in thought in order to birth designs, products, and services that will in effect make for effective living. Our workplaces ought to be community, wherein the social, the intellectual, and the spiritual fiber of each member of the team finds ample nourishment as each member bears an enthusiastic zeal towards achieving organizational objectives, which in turn satisfies that inherent desire to serve a worthwhile cause resident in every one of us. This is the new paradigm that must manure the workplace. This is the paradigm that will guarantee us our place individually and collectively in the global scheme of things. No one needs more drive and a practical view of the dignity in labor than the third world worker. We are yet to discover the great amounts of inventions and innovations we have the capacity to produce. We must think in this vein, my friends. The world is yet to see the best of us. There's dignity in labor, and this we must rediscover with renewed fervor or become victims of globalization. Our perspective on responsibility, on work and leisure must change if we must survive. We must rethink our value systems and reevaluate our tools of respect. We cannot imagine how many ladies make decisions on whom they intend to marry based on externalities. Just because a man is well dressed and drives a good car doesn't make him a wise gentleman. As a matter of fact, he could just be a rich fool for all you care, or a well-dressed wife beater. As Africans, our tool of respect is faulty, and our many years of economic repression has dented our tools of respect. We have been forced to respect people using material parameters. We form alliances and decide who we draw inspiration from based on this. The time has indeed come for a new generation to arise and redefine where we must stand on the map. You will truly be myopic if your benchmarks are local or continental. The world has gone global. The strength of any material is truly in its universal appeal. At 100 million naira, you are still 1,000 naira in dollars. What is the strength of your financial status, therefore? You will only be one-eye king in the land of the blind to pitch your tent on such a status. I believe we are on the threshold of a renaissance, but we must push harder than we have ever done before. Let us remain optimistic, for the future holds great promise. A generation of Nigerians are rising, I tell you, who are thirsty for knowledge, who are aware of the need to position globally and compete favorably for tomorrow in our rapidly changing world. This generation must not lose the spirit of hope. It must learn to work together, to receive and give help, looking into the future with enthusiasm. But much more than anything, it must learn to give bones to its optimism. If we hope, we must act. Time does not, of its own accord, create the change we desire. We must rather put effort into time. Change must never be left to time. Rather, we must leave change to responsibility and determine when it must happen. So, let us keep hoping and acting forward. Let us get out of our seminar halls and put more actions to those inspiring and motivational words. then let us go in again and come out more zealous to act. Hope plus action. That's the equation we must daily engage in order to determine the value of our tomorrow's reputation capital. Let us keep marching, hoping, acting forward. Nigeria indeed has a fantastic and great future, and it is you and I. We must realize that we are endangered species in a changing world, and we cannot respond like business as usual.
This is the end of Disc 1.